Anytime you think about giving our body the nutrients that it needs to be able to grow, heal, thrive, and survive, that's what we need. First, the main way to look at this, so you can cut through all the chatter that's out there, is look at what are our bodies actually made out of. And our bodies are made out of protein, fat, cholesterol, vitamins, minerals, and water. That's what our bodies are made out of. So that's what we have to give our bodies in order to nourish it. Because remember, the cells in our bodies are breaking down and rejuvenating all the time. Okay. So we're always changing out our cells in our bodies. We have a lot of energy that we need. Our brains are working, our heart's working, everything's beating. And so we need all the nutrients with all the chemical processes and everything. So when we talk about nourish your body, that's what we're talking about. So whenever you're looking at all these diets that are talking about don't eat protein, don't eat fat, don't eat cholesterol, basically all you're saying is give your body everything it doesn't need and that it's causing all kinds of metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. All that is because we're constantly giving our bodies the food that it does not need and is actually toxic to our body. So again, protein, fat, cholesterol, vitamins, and minerals. Those are the 5, and then water is always out there. So before we do this, and I swear I'm going to get into it really quickly, just think about the 3 main food sources right now. The worst one by far is toxic to our bodies, and I can't get this through to you enough, but man-made food is toxins, is actual poison to your body. The only reason people eat it constantly is because this is the kind of poison that it slowly accumulates over 10, 20, 30, 40 years with these toxins constantly building up in your body until all of a sudden your body can't handle it anymore. And that's when you start getting into all the organ damage. So it's hard for people to understand who are having to be put on dialysis. They're having strokes. They have Alzheimer's. They have cardiovascular disease. They have high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, obesity. This is all caused from the exact same thing. We're giving our bodies toxins when we're supposed to be giving them nutrients. The first thing that you've got to stop if you really do want to get healthy is you've got to stop eating man-made food. Man-made food means all these things are produced in a chemical plant. It's not grown out in nature. Everything in a box, bottle, bag, can, anything that has a list of ingredients that's longer than 3 or 4 ingredients, because most of those are going to be chemicals. Anything past that, it's chemicals, and these chemicals are very hard on your body. All man-made food is made out of ultra-processed grains, which it's turned to flour, and flour is just powdered glucose. Glucose is the toxin that we're talking about. All man-made food is made of flour, which is powdered glucose, sugar and high fructose corn syrup, which is glucose and fructose. So again, both of those, the glucose is toxic in our bodies, and the fructose gets changed straight into triglycerides and stored as fat. And then seed oils. Seed oils are extremely inflammatory, very toxic to our bodies. So that's why you've got to stay away from man-made food. So this leads us to the second category, which is God-made food. Now, God-made food means real animals, real fruits, and real vegetables. Okay. But now when you talk about plant-based food, under God-made food, so man-made food is chemical-based food. It's glucose and chemical-based food. Both of them are extremely toxic. God-made food is healthy. You have plant-based food, okay, and this is your fruits and your vegetables, and then you have animal-based foods. Animal-based foods would be anything that comes from an animal. That's meat, that's fish, that's butter, that's milk, that's yogurt, that's cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, butter. I haven't already said butter, but that's important. All that tallow, lard, those are all very important animal-based foods. And if you didn't know, we are animals. We are animals. So when you eat animals, they already have all the nutrients that our body also needs to grow, heal, thrive, and survive. Plants don't. They do have some protein. They do have some, well, basically a little bit of fat. Okay. And mainly you want to have the fruit fats like coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, and avocado oil. Those are the 3. Those are fruit fats. Those are fine. Stay away from all the other seed oils and all that other stuff. So God-made food, there's plant-based food and there's animal-based food. Plant-based food, all plant-based foods, everything that comes from a plant, everything that does not come from an animal, has carbohydrates in it. And carbohydrates are just long chains of glucose. And again, glucose is the toxin that we're talking about that is killing everybody. Glucose, that's in sugar, it's in flour, it's in almost every single thing that man makes in box, bottle, bag, can. Stay away from it. So plants have protein and carbs. So all plants have glucose. However, some have more than others. The ones that grow below the ground tend to have more glucose because that's starch, and starch are long chains of glucose. They tend to have more glucose than the plants that grow above the ground. Okay. So like your green leafy vegetables and your cruciferous vegetable, your broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, whatever, anything grows above the ground. It does have glucose, but not very much. That's not where your worry is. That's not what's killing us. In fact, the plants that grow below the ground aren't killing us either, unless you've already been killed by all the man-made food with all the glucose that's been slowly filling up your fat cells for the last 10, 20, 30 years. If that's what you're eating every day, all day long, which most people do, that's what's killing you. If you are already in that predicament where you've been killed by the man-made food, then you do want to go ahead. If you've already been diagnosed, if you're already obese, which means if you measure around the midsection between the top of your hip bone and the bottom of your rib cage, go right in the middle, measure that around your abdomen. If that is greater than half your height, okay, so if you're, say, 60 inches tall, if that's greater than 30 inches, that means that you have obesity and you are toxic. You do have insulin resistance, or you're on your way to, and you're going to have diabetes and everything else. So if that's, you might want to stay away from plants that grow below the ground as well. Okay. Now, animal-based foods like plant-based foods with protein and carbs. Animal-based food is protein and fat. Both of them are extremely vital for our health. We need all that. So animal-based food is good. And this isn't a diet. Should I eat animals? Should I eat plants? All that. It's nutrients for your body. Get away from all the chatter out there and just think, what is your body made of? So what does it need? So what do you need to do? If you are type 2 diabetic, if you are obese, if you have high blood pressure, if you have anxiety, have dementia, have any of these problems, what you need to do is, depending on how sick you are and how quickly you want to get better, you really want to stick with mainly animal-based foods. Eat animal-based foods. If you want a few plants, fruits, and vegetables every now and then, that's fine, but just do it more like a condiment. You don't want to make your whole meal out of a big salad and say, oh, look, I'm eating healthy, because you're not getting anywhere near the protein, nowhere near the vitamins and minerals, and nowhere near the fat when you're just sitting around eating salads all day. Plus, you're going to be starving to death all the time. So the keys are, first, animal-based foods. Stick with animal-based foods. You also only want to eat 1 to 3 times a day. You do not want to be snacking. Snacking is no, because most of the time when people are snacking, they're snacking on things that contain glucose. Because if you're snacking on something from the center aisles of the grocery stores, the man-made food, box, bottle, bag, can, if you're snacking on that, I guarantee you're putting more glucose into your body, and your body does not need that. So you only want to eat 1 to 3 times a day. And really the key is just have those meals, whether it's 1 meal, 2 meal, or 3 meals, that's up to you and where you are in your health status. But when you do that, try to keep that all in just a narrow window. So you eat all your meals in a 6 to 8 hour time period. That way you leave all the rest of the 14 to 16 hours left to keep your insulin levels low. Because remember, that's the key to everything, is keeping your insulin levels low. And the way you keep your insulin levels low is keep glucose out of your mouth. That's all you have to do. If you quit eating sugar and flour, which all man-made products are made out of, if you quit eating that, then your glucose levels will be low and your insulin levels will become low. And if you're not eating that, a lot of times your inflammation will also get a lot better. You'll decrease the inflammation. And remember, that's the 3 columns of disease: high glucose, high insulin, and inflammation throughout the body. So animal-based foods, only 1 to 3 meals a day. Eat all of it within an 8 hour window, and then leave all the rest, including sleep time, leave all the rest for your insulin levels to drop out, where you don't need anything. You only have water, unsweet coffee, and unsweet tea. Then the other thing, and this isn't really about food, but everybody needs to walk. You do not have to run. In fact, you shouldn't run. Running is very hard on your joints. But walking, you have to walk. You'll be amazed at how much better you feel when you walk every single day. And try to increase that. A lot of people try for 10,000 steps a day. That's great if you can do it. But really, even if you only get 4,500 steps a day, that has been shown to have significant increase in your health just by walking. The other thing is when you walk and when you eat this way, you don't get hungry. And that's the key. All these people are taking these medications and all this stuff to try to keep them feeling full. And you don't need to. If you eat protein, if you eat meat and fat, that's going to stay in the stomach for a long time and keep you satisfied. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So now let's look at just what these things are. So that's what you need to do. But that everything I just said, that's what you need to do if you want to get healthy. Animal-based foods, eat 1 to 3 times a day within an 8-hour window. No snacking. Drink plenty of water. That's half your weight in pounds divided by half your ideal body weight in pounds divided by 2. And that's the number of ounces you should be drinking every day of water. Remember, that's your ideal body weight. So if you are overweight, if you weigh 240 pounds and you're supposed to weigh 180, use the 180. Divide that by 2. That's 90. So you should be drinking 90 ounces of water today. So let's look at our 2 energy sources. Let's look at what we're doing. There's 2 different things that our body can use for energy. There's glucose that's supposed to be used for fight or flight energy only, and fat, which is supposed to be used for all our other energy. But since our old dietary guidelines came out in 77, they've told everybody that glucose is that's your preferred source of energy. Your body does not prefer glucose as its energy source. People get confused because if you eat glucose, your body's going to get rid of that before it does the fat. But that's because your body does not want high glucose, because high glucose is also very bad for your body. Glucose attaches to all the proteins in your bloodstream, in your body, in your cells, in your organs, everywhere. It glycates it and damages those proteins. So you do not want high blood glucose either. So when you use glucose as your energy source, what you tend to do is you end up, when that goes through the process of turning glucose into ATP, which is the energy that our body uses, when it does that, it produces carbon dioxide, water, and free radicals. Okay, these reactive oxygen species. And that's key. These free oxygen species, these go around and those cause damage in the body also. This is why everybody's talking about you need to be eating antioxidants. The main reason people need antioxidants is because they're using glucose for their main energy source, and that produces these free radicals. So that's one thing that's bad about using glucose. The other thing, when you eat glucose, when you eat carbohydrates, which means plant-based foods or man-made food, when you eat that stuff, it only stays in your stomach for about 30 to 60 minutes. Then it gets into your intestines and it only stays there for about 30 to 60 minutes before it gets into your bloodstream. Your blood glucose levels go high, then your insulin levels go high. Then insulin tells your body to turn all that glucose into fat in the form of triglycerides. Then high insulin also tells your body to store that fat. So the key is keep your insulin low. It doesn't stay in your stomach long, doesn't stay in your intestines long. It doesn't do anything to satiety. We have different hormones in our intestines that keep us feeling full. The term satiety means the feeling of fullness. So if something does not stimulate satiety, that means it's actually making you more hungry. And that's exactly what glucose does, because there are satiety centers, hormones in your intestines that when stimulated, they go up to the brain and say, I'm not hungry, stop eating. Okay. There's certain things, protein and fat stimulates those. Glucose does not. So just the fact that you're eating that, you never feel like you're full. The other thing is when you eat, besides that, the other thing that glucose does is as you fill up your fat cells, because of all this glucose you're eating, because glucose is what makes you fat. Eating fat does not make you fat. We've been told for decades now, and it is a lie. Insulin is the only thing that causes you to store fat, to make you become fat. So when your insulin levels are high, you are storing fat, and that occurs with glucose. That occurs with carbohydrates and man-made food. When you don't eat that, when you eat fat, doesn't affect the insulin levels at all. So your insulin levels stay down. When your insulin levels are low, you cannot store fat. All you can do is burn fat out of your fat cells. Just remember that eating fat does not make you fat. Eating glucose makes you fat. And glucose is the basic building block of all man-made food and all plant-based foods. The other thing, that as you start filling up all your fat cells, when a fat cell becomes full, that what it does, it sends out a hormone called leptin. Leptin is a hormone that's supposed to go up to the medial hypothalamus in the brain. And when it hits there, it says, I'm not hungry. Stop eating. That's what leptin is supposed to do. That's our own body's natural satiety hormone. However, when you are constantly filling all your fat cells and you have all this fat on your body, if you're obese, if you're overweight, that means that you are producing more leptin than you need. So now when it goes up the hypothalamus, say, whoa, I have way too much leptin. So it becomes resistant. So now one of your main body's satiety hormones doesn't work anymore because now you've made your hypothalamus leptin resistant. The other thing that happens is they're also finding, they think that insulin, just the fact that insulin levels are high, insulin also can block leptin. So just the fact that you're eating glucose, which means you're eating carbohydrates, which means you're eating plant-based foods or man-made food, when you do that, you produce insulin that blocks the leptin. When you eat that, it doesn't stimulate the other hormones in your intestines that keep you feeling full. So just the fact that you eat glucose means that you're making yourself more and more hungry. That's why we want to get you away from, is we don't want you increasing your triglycerides. We don't want you increasing your fat storage, because that's what happens. And if you eat that stuff, you're going to be starving constantly. Remember, glucose is only supposed to be used for fight or flight energy, not our everyday energy. So now let's compare that. Let's compare and contrast that with when you use fat. So I just talked about glucose and why that's absolutely horrible for you. Now remember, if you take all the glucose out of your blood, our body does use glucose, but it makes all the glucose it needs out of protein and out of fat. It can turn both of those into glucose. And that's the way our body's supposed to be. If you take all the glucose out of your bloodstream and measure it, it only comes to 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's all. We do not need a lot of glucose. Now compare that to 1 can of soda pop. 1 12-ounce can of soda pop has 10 teaspoons of sugar. Fast forward to 2015, that increased to 65 teaspoons of sugar per day that is estimated that we take in. That is toxic. Anytime. That's a 32-fold increase over 1965. Anything that you eat 30 times more than you're supposed to, you're going to be toxic on it. And glucose is the worst. So just because it takes decades before you start seeing it, don't let that fool you, because once you do see it, when you are older and now you have damaged all your cells and you have filled up all your fat cells, this is when you start in your renal failure, your liver failure, your heart failure, your brain failure. You start having failure, your skin failure, you start having psoriasis, GI issues. You have all kinds of GI issues, Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, colitis. It just goes on. And all this is caused by the exact same things. Be careful with the medications. Those all have multiple adverse effects, but stop the glucose and start eating mainly animal-based meals, and you're going to feel so much better. So let's compare them. One, remember when I said when glucose gets metabolized, it gets converted into carbon dioxide, water, and these free radicals. When you eat fat, it also produces energy, a lot more. In fact, carbohydrates only produce 4 calories per gram. Fat produces 9 calories per gram. So it's a much, much better energy source. Now, when fat gets metabolized to ATP, it only gets converted to carbon dioxide and water and the ATP. No free radicals. So it's a much cleaner burn. Our body does a lot better with it. The other thing we talked about, how long it stays in your stomach. Remember, glucose, carbohydrates, they stay in your stomach about 30 to 60 minutes. Then when they get down the intestines, about another 30 to 60 minutes before all of a sudden you have this huge glucose rise in your blood and a huge insulin rise and everything that happens after that. However, when you eat meat and fat, that stays in your stomach for about 2 to 4 hours after you've eaten it. Then once it gets into the intestines, it stays about another 4 to 24 hours. So it constantly keeps you feeling full. And the whole time the fat and protein is going down through your intestines, it's also stimulating those satiety centers I talked about earlier. The hormones are cholecystokinin and peptide YY. These are stimulated by the presence of amino acids and fatty acids in the intestines. Both cholecystokinin and peptide YY, when those are stimulated, again, those go to the medial hypothalamus, just like leptin does, and that tells your brain, I'm full, stop eating. So there's many different reasons why when you eat meat and fat, you stay full for long periods of time. This is why people who do intermittent fasting, like we do, can go with eating just 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day, and sometimes we'll go 2 days without having anything to eat. And we are not hungry because, and there's different reasons. One, when you eat glucose, you're not giving your body any nutrients. When you eat man-made food, you are giving your body no fat, no fat, no vitamins, no minerals, and no protein. Basically, no protein. You're not giving your body any nutrients. So your body, that's the other reason why your body makes you hungry. It's like when it needs nutrients, whether it's nutrients or whether it's water, which is also nutrient, when it needs those things, it makes you hungry. That's why when you eat carbohydrates, like all these salads or all this man-made food all the time, thinking you're eating healthy, that's why in about 3 hours, you're starving again because you never gave your body the nutrients, as well as you blocking your own body's natural satiety hormones. The other thing that when you eat fat, remember glucose stimulates insulin, and high insulin levels that's the main thing that's causing all of our issues, diseases in all of our organs. When you eat fat, it doesn't affect insulin levels at all. When you eat fat, you keep your insulin levels low, and fat can be circulated around your body to all the multiple things that fat can be used for. Glucose is only used for energy. Fat is used for cushioning of your bodies. It's used for energy. It's used for the fat soluble vitamins. It's a basis for a lot of your hormones like cortisol, your stress hormone, and vitamin D and testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. These are all fat-based fuels. So we need that. And it cushions all our body, our joints, our organs. Fat is very valuable. And every single one of your cells, and we're replenishing cells constantly. Every single cell has a fatty cell membrane. So we use fat for everything. So fat is healthy. Fat is nourishing. Glucose is not. So now remember, we've been lied to since the late 70s. So I definitely don't blame you for not understanding this. I went to college for 12 years. I went to pharmacy school. Then I practiced as a clinical pharmacist, a doctor of pharmacy for the next 29 years. And I've been a doctor of pharmacy for 35 years. I was never told about all this. I was told the same horrible lies that all of you have been told, that about the food pyramid. Most of our food that we should have should be flour and grains and all this. And that's why, thank God, that RFK Jr. has now, they've changed the food pyramid to go more in line with what we actually are doing or what we actually need. And that means basically get rid of the carbohydrates. And it's mainly what I've been telling you, mainly based food. Now, also remember, that's great that we're changing the food pyramid, but also remember that along with that food pyramid, they're still telling everybody they have to have less than 10% of their calories need to come from saturated fat. That is a death sentence. That is not true. And they're making the military do that, the hospitals do that, and the schools do that. So that's the next thing that we have to get changed. Most of your calories should be coming from fat. So don't believe that part of it. So we are on the right track. We're just not there yet. But when you think about this, think about how they fatten up cattle. Remember when you talk about grass-fed, grass-finished beef or grass-fed, grain-finished? The way you fatten up a cow is you feed it the grass, and then you start feeding it grains, and grains fatten that up cow very quickly, like within just a few months. Then you can take it to the slaughterhouse. So grains make you fat, okay? Just like the food pyramid was lying to you about. The other thing, fruit. Fruit has fructose. Remember, how do bears hibernate? They go around, they forage on all these berries, on all this fruit, because as they eat all this fruit, all that fructose gets turned immediately into fat. And now you have the big fat bear that's ready for hibernation. So yes, fruit can make you fat. When you eat your fruits and vegetables, you need to do that only when they're actually growing. It's called eating seasonally. If it's not actively growing in that month, you shouldn't be eating them either. So if you're eating strawberries in the middle of December, that's genetically modified. So the food pyramid we've been lying about. We've been lied about eating fat makes you fat. I've already talked about that. That's crazy. Insulin is what makes you fat, and that comes from glucose. Now, just to remember, and I did a podcast on this, just to let you know what's going on. Remember, back in the 1900s, all the way up to 1999, okay, there were only 2 classes of diabetic drugs that encompassed 6 or 7 medications, okay? In the 1980s and 1990s, they never came up with another diabetic medication. They didn't come up with any because they said that there's not enough type 2 diabetics to make it worth their while. And there was no proof, there was no science that showed that just by lowering glucose, you were making somebody healthier. It didn't happen. Okay. So now what happens now that was in 1970. From the 2000s on to now, 2026, in that amount of time, they've come up with 4 new classes of diabetic medications, which makes a total of 6 classes. And they came up with 26 more drugs that before, and then for 20 years, the last 20 years of the 1900s, they said they were going to make any more. And now they've made an average of 1 new diabetic drug every year. Why? Because diabetic drugs makes diabetes worse. Why? Because diabetic drugs work by either increasing your insulin, making your pancreas produce more insulin, or they make your cells more sensitive to insulin. So what they do is they have you focus on the blood glucose. Yeah, they're getting that down for a little while, but they're making your insulin resistance worse. So all they're doing is kicking the can down the line. So eventually, all you're doing is you're stuffing your cells even more stuff than they should be. And eventually you're going to wipe all those out also, and your glucose is going to rise again. And that's when they put you on another diabetic medication, and they make money hand over fist, trillions of dollars off diabetics. And all you have to do is quit eating glucose and don't fall for their schemes. The medical community has you focus on getting your blood glucose down. They have you focus on getting your weight down. Okay. It's neither one of those, because as you're getting your glucose down with medications, you're getting your glucose down, but you're getting your insulin levels up. So you're making diabetes worse. They also have you focus on weight loss by giving you some of these medications like the GLP-1 agonists and all these. But they don't tell you that what you're doing is you're actually, when you don't eat because of the GLP-1s, when you're not hungry and you're not eating, you're not giving your body the ingredients it needs. Remember, it needs protein, it needs fat, vitamins, minerals, water, and cholesterol. When you don't eat that, your body's going to get it from what your body already has. Your body does store fat all over in your subcutaneous cells. That's the healthy way. And then when you start storing around an organ, that's the unhealthy way. It stores glucose, just tiny bit, 10% of your liver. That's all it is, just enough for your fight or flight energy. It does not store protein. So when your body needs fat, needs protein, it's going to get it from what's already there. So what it does when you don't eat protein, your body starts eating your muscles away, because it'll protect your organs, because your organs need protein also. Everything needs protein. And if you don't give it, it's going to risk all your muscle loss. And that's what they're not telling you. This is what this weight loss that all these people are seeing is because they're causing their body to become auto-cannibalism. Auto-cannibalism means your body is eating itself from the inside out. It's eating its fat because it needs the energy source. And then it also needs all the other things that fat's used for throughout the body, but it's also burning up all your muscle, which you do not want to lose muscle, because as you get older, muscle is going to be one of the things that's probably going to save your life. If you go to trip, you need to be able to grab something. You need to be able to not trip in the first place. That's the number one reason why people fall when they're elderly, is because they don't have enough strength, don't have enough muscle mass. What you want to do is don't focus on getting your glucose down. Focus on getting your insulin down. No medication will ever be made that'll help get your insulin down. The only way you have to do it is quit eating glucose, quit eating sugar, quit eating flour, and that'll keep your insulin levels low. The other thing is, so it's not about getting your glucose down. It's about not eating in the first place. Don't get your glucose up, because that's the only way your blood glucose up. The only way it goes up is because you eat it or you're stressed and it takes from your store. When you're stressed out, that'll break down your glucose stores and put glucose into the blood so you can handle whatever quick energy you need for the fight or flight. However, most of it, almost all the glucose you have in your blood is because you eat it. So all you have to do to get your blood glucose down is you have to take the medication until you change your nutrition. Once you've changed your nutrition, you realize you're eating way too much glucose, then you stop eating the glucose, and then your insulin will come down and you don't need the diabetic medications anymore. So that's the key. That is the key. If you can just do that I guarantee you can reverse your type 2 diabetes. You can get off your blood pressure medication, get off heart medications. There's all kinds of medication you can get off of. You have to do it with your physician's guidance for most of these. Okay. You have to have your physician's guidance. You do not need his approval. you're changing your nutrition. If you tell them how you're changing your nutrition and they disagree, you need to find a new physician because they have no idea what nutrition is about. And that's not their fault. They are taught no nutrition in medical school. I wasn't taught nutrition in medical school. It's not their fault. But if they don't want to learn and they just want to tell you what they've been taught from the drug companies to tell you, you need to find a new physician. The main thing is if you focus on your health, you're going to find that you can handle a lot of other things. Once you focus on your health, if you've been sick and you focus on your health and you get better again, you start having better quality of life, you're going to feel so good about yourself. People are going to see you smiling. They're going to see the energy they have. They're going to see how clearly you have thinking, and you're going to be attracting better people into your lives. And this can totally change your life. I know for a fact because it happened to my wife and I. So please focus on your health, and you'll be amazed at how many other good things come into your life. So that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, stay nourished and stay well.